Chapter 1. Somewhere in the world, there is an anthill. A completely normal anthill. Except for one single individual. Perhaps there is a genetic defect. Maybe there was a mold in the brood chamber. It could have been as little as a mutation of the DNA sequence off by one single nucleotide. Regardless of the cause, this ant would go on throughout its larval stage as many ants would, sitting still, being fed proteins and nectar from the social stomachs of her worker ant sisters. However, as it emerged from its pupae, there was a defect in its behavior. When she went out to hunt small invertebrates with her sisters, she didn't neatly cut up the pieces to bring home back to the colony. No, she ate them. This ant was hungry for meat. As the queen sensed the drop in temperatures, she began laying less and less eggs, so the colony hunted fewer bugs. But our ant, she remained hungry. She was drawn first to the ants that were taken from the nest due to their old age and disease, tearing apart her own sisters, living, dead, it didn't matter. As long as their insides were fresh, she would devour them. When winter finally arrived, the colony slowed to a standstill, but not our little ravenous ant. Fueled by her hunger, she made her move, starting with the workers. One by one, she devoured them. Then the brood, the larva, pupa, they were helpless without the workers. The eggs were next, and then finally, she was alone with the queen, her own mother, sleeping through the winter. She worked her way through the queen's large thorax, where her wings once were, and ate the remaining tissue. Then she worked down to the abdomen, where every single last one of her sisters were born. She hollowed out the queen's exoskeleton. As she feasts in the nest, with nothing else near her, she rests, waiting for spring, or maybe waiting for something else? A small pile of dirt falls from the ceiling, then more, and more until the ceiling caves in. Sunlight. A hairy intruder had broken in. A small mouse sniffs about for a second, and then licks our ant, gobbling it up. Moving on, ending the story of the killer ant. Chapter 2. A harmless little field mouse, living in a harmless little field. He scurries and hurries, trying to find fallen seeds, insect burrows, and anything else he can find. With the passing of the season, Little Mouse had to start bulking if he hoped to spread his genes to the next generation. After days of tirelessly hunting, scavenging, and feasting, the time had come. Little Mouse finds the scent of a potential mate. He follows the scent through the field, under a log, into a burrow, where he finds he's too late. Another male has already gotten there. No problem for Little Mouse. He simply tears the male apart and does his job, defending the female for a few hours before finding another meal. How'd this other mouse get into his burrow? Oh well. When in Rome, Little Mouse eats the intruder and expands the burrow, digging new chambers for food. Babies? Workers? All while leaving his pheromones to attract... What was he attracting again? Mates. Food. Whatever. Anything's welcome for Little Mouse. After about a week of on and off hunting and burrowing, the Little Mouse had quite the stockpile of food. Mice kept coming into his burrow, and he kept defending it, ferociously, mind you. So much that he had no way of eating all his spoils. His brood chamber sits empty, though. His brood chamber sits empty, though. That need to pass on genes is all that's left on Little Mouse's to-do list. So he ventures out into the woods. The small, blood-soaked and dirt-matted pelt of this usually well-groomed and borderline hygienic species stalks the underbrush of the woods, searching for mates, and finding a scent trail. Little Mouse follows the scent to a tree with a hollow about 30 feet up. He begins to climb. He enters the hole and finds nothing but sticks and feathers. My, what a particular nest this is. No sign of a mate anywhere, but the smell of mice is almost as strong as his own den. Almost as fast as he enters, a dark figure pops its head through the hole. A large beak plucks Little Mouse and holds it over the nest, where a hungry hawk nestlings rip it to bite-sized pieces, and ends the story of our Little Mouse. Chapter 3. Our hawk was very young, so young, in fact, that it only recently left the nest. Its two siblings killed each other in the nest, and mother and father were eaten in their sleep. Must find food, but the winter is heavy, the air is crisp. Maybe we must go elsewhere. We can fly. We must move out of the meadow, away from the forest, towards the zoo. The zoo is a strange ecosystem full of cages full of non-native organisms, short quadrupeds deprived of their ability to hunt, small fish in unnaturally glass ponds, and the tall, hairless apes, going from one cage to another, being taken who knows where on a daily basis. All wildlife knew this was a bad place to be, but a place those desperate for food could survive. Perched on a fence, we wait, searching for a rodent, a squirrel, a rabbit, anything. Hell, we'd eat another bird right now. There, that arch, a small feline. It's not a lynx or a bobcat. It doesn't look like a mountain lion either. It's small and orange, but it's got its belly up and its eyes closed. We could swoop in, sink our talons into it. Easy, an easy meal. In and out, enough food for a while. We take off, gliding down quickly. Then, right before we make it to the feline, talons up, smash! The young hawk slammed into a glass window, breaking its own neck, falling onto the concrete of the porch. It lays there for nearly a day before a human scoops it up with a shovel and throws it into a nearby thicket. There it sits for winter, frozen, unable to break down and decompose. But as the season comes by, a fly comes and lays its eggs. Those eggs hatch into larvae and begin devouring the body. Then a robin comes by and picks up the grubs. Then it walks off, feeling the effects of its newfound affliction. Standing still, a nearby deer gobbles up the bird. The cycle continues. Chapter 4. It had been a decent fall. Light rain showers, warm nights, sunny days. Everyone in Premberry was content. It had been a good year for the small mountain town. A few more weeks and hunting season will be in full swing. Not that the hardcore hunters needed an excuse to go out, but it was nice having a week where all the buddies could go hunting together instead of just tagging the deer damaging their crops. One man in particular was prepared to go to war, a taxidermist by the name of Russ. He was an older man, nearly 65. He was the son of a butcher and a swineherd, and he truly believed that no part of the animal should go to waste. Russ had heard from trappers of a megabuck, a deer who had killed its male rivals in their sparring matches. They showed pictures of mangled deer bodies with antler points and hoof holes riddling the carcass. And Russ knew he had to get this megabuck. Firstly, so it doesn't waste good deer meat, and secondly, so he can make his magnum opus. As the season crept ever closer, Russ began asking folks if they'd ever seen a suspiciously large buck. On their trail cams or in person, in the fields, anything. Everyone he went to had no useful intel, except, ironically, for one man, Little Bobby Det, given that nickname by his older cousin, Big Bobby Det. Little Bobby had a reputation in town for being a bullshitter, but he was also as sober as the day he was born. Little Bobby told Russ a retelling a few nights ago. You see, I was watching my barn for Ma, because her sow was about ready to burst, and on account of Pa's bad leg, she can't so much as take his eyes off him, lest she want him to be wind up laying with Grammy. But, you see, when old Welly, that's a sow, mind you, gave birth, she also voided her bowels, and I got the piglets cleaned and squealing. Well, I was just about nauseated from the smell. So I went and take a lap around the sunflower patch, and I thought I heard what sounded like a deer. So I stopped and shined my spotlight down one of the rows, and what do I see but a buck the size of the governor's truck standing over a coyote, or should I say what's left of one. Now usually I'd say good for him getting that damn coyote, but the damn thing was ripped to more pieces than a Denton family farm. And the buck was looking right at me. I could practically feel my heartbeat through my boots. Its eyes, Russ. They weren't right. They were predator eyes, Russ. If you reckon you can kill that, I think you oughta. But you know it'll be fixing to kill you too. Russ took this at face value. The deer was big, somewhere near the Det family farm, and it had wild eyes. A good start, but Russ was trying to set up a tree stand with Pauline's permission. Maybe a snare trap for good measure. Day 1. Russ set a snare and climbed the stand. Made sure the hunting rifle was loaded and ready. Then he waited. Nothing. Day 2. He set another snare, sprayed some doe urine, climbed the stand, checked the rifle, wait. Nothing. Deer walked by, so he had to spook it so it didn't set off the snares. Day 3. Light rain, foggy. Oh well. Reset the snares, spray more urine, check the rifle, and a deer got snared. Great. A normal buck, 4 points. Fairly small. And it freaks out the way any trapped animal does. Russ hears something abnormal. A sound of dirt moving, like a bulldozer pushing dirt down a steep slope. Peering over his shoulder, he sees it. Picture a deer, the size of a moose, emerging from the earth, with a rack of massive pointed antlers with broken tips. With 2 broken tips for every intact one, no less. Its head was easily 6 feet off the ground as it's still knee-deep in the dirt, its eyes orange and piercing. Now what Russ saw was a dirt-coated, wild-eyed beast crawling its way out of hell itself. He watched it calmly walk to the snared deer, lower its antlers, and stab them into the trapped deer, then wrenched its head, tearing flesh and breaking off some of its own antlers in the body, breaking the snare the deer lays on the ground as well. Breaking the snare, the deer lays on the ground as well as hung from the rack of the beast. The beast, however, simply lowered its head and began to graze on the now opened cavity. Russ slowly and silently raised his rifle, aimed for above the shoulder, hoping for a hard shot, not as to give the monster quick death, but rather to guarantee the thing will actually die. Bang! The beast shoots up, standing on its rear legs, shrieking a high-pitched screech-like call, fading into a groaning moan as it stumbles about and falls to the earth, the rain washing the blood and dirt from its coat. It took Russ an hour and a half to drag the body back to his truck. Man, did he wish he had parked closer. Russ made the journey home, skinned, cleaned, and sealed the prime cuts of meat, chemically dried and tanned the hide and set it to cure. While he took the organs and bones to make stock, he didn't much care for steaks or meat sticks, but man, would he go for lengths for a good bowl of stew. It had been a month or so since Russ took down the megabuck. The mount was nearly complete. That is to say, everything was intact except the broken points of its antlers and its eyes. Russ had to special paint a new set of eyes for it, as he knew none of the standard eyes would capture the raw savagery of the living megabuck. And with the installation of the new orange pupils, the taxidermy was done. As reward for its completion, Russ partook in a practice he found himself repeating at least once a season. He grabbed a deer steak from the megabuck, diced it, stewed it for hours with onions, potatoes, carrots, a little bit of sauerkraut. Little did Russ know, using the same knife for the meat and the vegetables had contaminated the vegetables. But the cooking process had actually sterilized the food, saving Russ for about an hour before he used the same knife to cut the food on his plate and eat it. His celebratory meal, victory of the artistic process, celebration of the life of the megabuck. Russ unknowingly becomes the next host to the same condition that plagued the megabuck, the robin, the larva, the hawk, the mouse, and the ant, all before him.